Nation, and welcome into DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation insider Connor Riley. And when we filmed DawgNation at Large last week, it was right after practice, so we could only talk about the things that we could see in the moment. But in the few days following that show, there was a picture of Dylan Bell that was put out by Georgia football, and I kind of feel bad that we missed this, but this just shows Dylan Bell is absolutely jacked right now, Connor, and that gives me that maybe his stock could go up.
I'm not going to put a little too much into this photo. It's a little underwear Olympics to me. But look, as a longtime fan of Dylan Bell, a guy who graduated this week from the University of Georgia, it's a big season for him. And he's just one of the many reasons to be excited about Georgia football this fall.
The roster has him listed as like 6'1.5", 210, but he does not look 210 to me in that picture. And when you kind of compare him to some of the other wide receivers in that group, like Noah Thomas is 6'5", 205. He's 4 inches taller than Dylan Bell, but a little bit skinnier. And then also someone like CJ Wiley, who has 3 inches on Dylan Bell, is also in that 210 range. And I know that we kind of expect Dylan to take on more of a running role this year too. So seeing some of that weight that he's put on, I don't know. This is somebody that I haven't been very high on this offseason, and I feel like maybe I should be starting to.
Sleeping on Dylan Bell. Can't be me. I think Dylan, look, Kirby mentioned this spring he can help out at running back with Josh McCray, a little bit limited right now. I think that's certainly something that is encouraging for Georgia because while McCray might be in the best shape to start fall camp, Dylan Bell certainly looks to be that way.
Well, with that, it's just a reminder that football season is getting close, and I'm taking any inch I can and turning it into a mile. But with that, you mentioned Josh McCray. We're going to talk a lot about the running back. So with that, we'll go ahead and get into today's show on DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
It's kind of crazy to think about here in just a few weeks. Connor and I will be doing some sort of preview of Marshall, and it feels like it's been so long since football season has happened. And so the fact that we're even getting there, I'm just really grateful for that. And so what we have going on today's show is I feel like maybe there's a Georgia player that's been overlooked a lot this season, and that's the Georgia running back Nate Frazier. We're going to get into why and why it may not be so much a Nate Frazier issue. Then we'll do our Dog Bite segment where we cover a variety of topics. And with Georgia's first scrimmage being this weekend, the topic is going to be who are the 5 players that we want to hear good things about coming out of that scrimmage. We'll follow it up with our favorite memes of the week. And then, it's the big one. The one that we've been waiting for this entire offseason, and it's going to be our DawgNation at Large playoff predictions. And I have a feeling that it could probably get ugly. So we'll save that for the end. But I want to start with this. So we're kind of at that point now where the offseason is almost over, the season's about to start, and like lists are starting to come out, and people are kind of finishing up doing their talking season points and who they expect to have a good season. And going through these lists and seeing what everyone has to say, I feel like the UGA program as a whole is still probably giving some of that credit that it deserves just because Kirby Smart is at the head of the program. But it's the individual players that aren't getting that same respect. And for me, I think that starts with Nate Frazier. And part of the problem is that I feel like, Connor, that Georgia fans know what Nate Frazier is capable of, but maybe it's the national media that doesn't.
Well, and let's look at this from that national media perspective. Georgia was not a great rushing team a season ago. 102nd in yards per game, I believe 84th in yards per attempt. So why should we expect that Georgia is going to suddenly be a better rushing team and thus that the leading rusher on that rushing attack, Nate Frazier, is going to be a star player? And let's remember with Frazier in particular, part of the reason his numbers didn't pop in the same way that a lot of people anticipated were self-inflicted because Frazier struggled to hold on to the football. Part of the reason he didn't play at all against Alabama was because fumbles were a big issue for him during practice. And that continued even when he was inserted to the lineup over the course of the season. Lost one against Ole Miss, was very fortunate not to lose one in that SEC championship game against Texas. And so with Frazier freshman year, yes, he did some nice things. He has a juice to him that I don't think Georgia has had at the running back position. since James Cook, really, and even going further back than that, really DeAndre Swift in terms of an every down running back. But Frazier's got a lot to prove this season. While Georgia fans expect a lot of him, I think the fact that the way that we view this rushing attack is going to determine just how big of a star Frazier ends up becoming this year.
So just as a reminder, we'll give you Nate Frazier's stats from this past year. Starting with the attempts, 133, which is 19th in the SEC, yards per game, a little over 51, 16th in the SEC, averaging a little over 5 yards per carry, 15th in the SEC, and then he had 8 touchdowns, which has him tied for 9th. And I understand the argument that there isn't a number that totally jumps off the page here, but I think that there's a lot of things that maybe the numbers can't prove, like the fact that Nate was a true freshman running back having to play against some of the best teams in the SEC. I look at Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas, some of the teams that you mentioned who in the SEC were the top 3 rushing defense teams. Nate Frazier was also a summer enrollee who came in late, and I don't think that he even expected the role that he was going to have to play, but with Trevor Etienne being out that first game, he was kind of thrown into the fire. So I think this also kind of goes to prove that the numbers aren't always what it seems, especially when it comes to a guy like Nate Frazier.
Yeah, and in projecting Nate Frazier going into this coming season, I do think that there was a lot of overlap in skill set between Nate Frazier and Trevor Etienne. There are some good things with that and some bad things with that. But in having Etienne, a player that the Georgia coaching staff very much liked, that always spoke very highly of, and there was the fact that, well, yes, it was his first year in the program, he got to go through spring practice. He got to do all of the things that Frazier got to do this spring. And so there's a lot to like about Frazier. The coaching staff has consistently raved about Frazier and the way that he has attacked this position, the way that he's attacked this offseason. Well, for a Georgia offense that flatly needs to run the ball better this year, we've heard just about everyone say it, that's going to come down to Frazier. And Georgia hasn't had a 1,000-yard rusher since DeAndre Swift in 2019. Given the slow start we've seen Josh McCray get to in fall camp right now, if this Georgia rushing offense is going to be what they want it to, Nate Frazier is going to have to top that 1,000-yard mark, in my opinion.
So really quick, before we get into something that you brought up earlier, I just want to show everyone where Nate Frazier, or at least the Georgia running back room, falls in some of the national rankings that are out there. ESPN, Nate Frazier got the honorable mention with only 6 votes. PFF, which I feel like has a pretty accurate grading system, graded the UGA running back room as a whole in 8th. For Fox, he wasn't ranked at all. CBS also got the honorable mention. But I want to go back to one of Connor's earlier points that he made, and this ties back in with the argument that I don't necessarily think it's Nate's fault as a whole. People aren't giving him the recognition that he deserves because what Connor said, Georgia had one of the weakest run games in not just the SEC, but all of college football last year. So I don't think it's necessarily people overlooking Nate as an individual, but not even putting him into consideration because of now what they viewed the Georgia run game as because of just the monstrosity that it was last year.
And so, again, look, a lot of this is going to come on the offensive line. We had heard Kirby Smart talk about Gunnar Stockton and the impact that he's going to have on this rushing attack this season. And look, and we've said it before, if this offense is going to improve and this Georgia team is going to get back to the college football playoff, it has to run the football better. And while, yes, there's a lot to like about Bo Walker and the way that he started fall camp to this point, I think that Frazier's going to have to be the guy. And we haven't really seen Georgia go with a single back look in terms of the way that they split up the carries in that regard. And so what they do with McCray will be interesting to see. But Frazier absolutely has to be the guy. And while it's understandable that maybe the national media doesn't fully know who he is, by the end of the season, if Georgia's going to be a college football playoff team, if Georgia's going to be a team that advances in the college football playoff, Frazier's going to have to pretty clearly be a top 10 running back and probably closer to the top 5 than, say, the top 10.
And you bring up Kirby Smart. The thing is like we've only had a few press conferences and practices this far into fall camp, but I feel like something that keeps coming up is the emphasis on the run game, not even just from Kirby Smart, but others too. We heard it with Mike Bobo yesterday. But for instance, yesterday, Kirby Smart was asked about how he could use the run game to help Gunnar Stockton. This is what he had to say.
Define being more efficient, not as many third and longs, right? More than 5 yards per rush, which is a lofty goal. if you rush the ball more than 5 yards per attempt, you'll be one of the top teams in the country. I mean, that's a goal for us. That's what it looks like. Now, how does it help Gunner? I think that's obvious. He doesn't have to have the pressure of 3rd, 7 to 10 every down. It frees things up. It opens up your play action. I mean, all the obvious things, but there's a lot that goes into running the ball better, and that's what we're working on right now.
So in the past, the foundation of successful Georgia teams has always been built upon the run game. And last year, not only was Georgia second to last in yards per games, but also attempts per game as well. And I know that they could rely a little bit more on Carson Beck because he did have such a strong arm, but it also made me think back to the Sugar Bowl when we got to hear Kirby Smart speak. There was a lot of questions about Gunner Stockton, and he kept putting the emphasis on it's not even necessarily about Gunner, but more so about getting stronger in the run game. And with this being Gunner's first year as a starter, I think that we're going to see those numbers on the attempts go way up.
And so I think there's been so much talk this offseason about Gunner and what they want to see from him and can he be elite. Gunner Stockton is not as good of a quarterback as Carson Beck was. And I know that Carson Beck was a very flawed player a season ago, but Carson didn't have a ton of help around him. And I think that showed up in the running game. And so this offseason, part of the plan has been we have to put Gunner in a more successful position than they put Carson Beck a season ago. And they'll be the first to admit they probably asked Carson Beck to do more than he should have been asked to do. And so with Gunner this year, Gunner's going to bring a lot to the table. Gunner's going to do a lot of really good things for this team. But as you heard Kirby Smart say, we can't constantly be behind the sticks. And I think with Gunner's mobile ability, if you're able to find yourself in a lot more 3rd and 4s, 3rd and 3s, as opposed to 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s, you're going to be able to use Gunner's rushing ability, I think, to an advantage there. And we heard Mike Bobo speak this week about Gunner learning and needing to protect himself. Another way to do that is to make sure he doesn't even have to take the hits at all. And if you're able to consistently move the ball and get the ball out of his hands quickly, whether it be on a pass or be an RPO, or even just turning around and handing the ball off to Nate Frazier, that's one way you get more out of this offense and more out of this rushing offense in 2025 when you do have a new full-time starting quarterback taking over in Gunner Stockton.
Well, the last part of what Kirby said there about the 3rd and long situations that they were in last year got me thinking because, I mean, watching it, you could tell there was so many, but like, what did that actually mean for the team and its offense? I did some girl math here, so you're going to have to stick with me. So on one side, you're going to see the 3rd down conversion percentage based on Georgia's ranking in the SEC versus how many rushing yards they had per game. Last year, second to last in the SEC for 3rd down conversion, but 15th in the SEC for yards per game. But then you look at some of the more successful seasons like 2023, first place in 3rd down conversion, 3rd for yards per game. 2022, first in the SEC for 3rd down conversion, 4th in the SEC for rushing yards per game. 2021 is like a little bit of an outlier because when we think about that national championship team, they really relied on the defense, but you still see the correlation between the two numbers. 4th in the SEC for 3rd down conversion and 6th in the SEC for the rushing yards per game. I think it's very clear looking at the numbers that there is a correlation between the two, and I think Kirby Smart knows that. And so when he says that they are working on things like that, I believe it. And maybe the run game, it's certainly going to get better from last year. Maybe it doesn't necessarily look like 2023 and 2022, but I think that Georgia's really good about recognizing those issues and what can we do in camp to make that better. So I don't expect Georgia to return back to the top of the SEC in terms of just the elite rushing game, but they're going to make strides because I know based on how much it's been talked about in camp that that's something that they are working on every single day.
Nationally, I believe Georgia ranked either 1st or 2nd in 3rd down conversion rate in 2023. A big reason why was because they were so successful running behind Daijun Edwards and Kendall Milton. Now, those guys are a little bit of a bigger running back than Nate Frazier is. But one of the things that we heard Mike Bobo say yesterday, he wants Nate Frazier to no longer just look for the home run. And yes, Georgia was badly missing explosive runs a season ago. I believe they ranked 86th in the country in rushes over 10 yards or more. That's by far the lowest of Kirby Smart's tenure here. But there's nothing wrong with taking a single or taking a double and just getting those 6-7 yards and setting yourself up to where maybe you can be a little bit more explosive and run a little bit more play action on 2nd and 3 instead of facing a 2nd and 9 and having to try and get yourself into a 3rd and manageable and not always necessarily succeeding there. So there's a way that third down success rate, specifically when it comes to Georgia's rushing offense, as you laid out, Kaylee, is going to be tied together. And that's going to be something we're going to monitor all season, because I think that's going to be a way to determine how healthy this Georgia offense is.
And when it comes to Nate Frazier, you mentioned the fumbles, but also in terms of just like decision making in general, I feel like a lot of that gets better with age. And Nate was put at that disadvantage because of how late he came into last season. But of course, being a freshman, going through an absolute gauntlet of an SEC schedule, there's always going to be that nerves there. But a year in the SEC, a year in the Georgia program, I expect those careless mistakes that we saw last year, I feel like they get resolved this year. And with Josh McCray getting a late start and still not being back in camp yet, also not having to split as many reps as he did last year, I think by the end of the season, Nate Frazier is going to get that national recognition that I truly believe that he deserves.
And the most important thing, I think, with Frazier this year, that I think it kind of submarined the season that Trevor Etienne could have had a season ago. Availability is the best ability, making sure you're doing everything to make sure that you're on the field all the time. I know a lot of that can be tied to injuries. You know, Etienne was suspended for the Clemson game a season ago. But part of that, too, pass blocking on third down. That's another way that you can make sure you're available and on the field for as many downs as you possibly are. Not fumbling the football and getting into the doghouse in that regard. Making sure that you're available and able to be on the field every single down, like Frazier has the potential to be for Georgia, I think is going to be the key ability to watch for him and see how he grows in that regard in 2025.
So my final thought on all of this is that yes, Georgia has a new quarterback, and yes, they've brought in a ton of pieces in the pass catching room from the transfer portal or at the high school level, but I think that Georgia's really trying to focus on getting back to the basics, and a lot of that's going to start with Nate Frazier, and I feel like that's something that we're really going to see early in that SEC schedule. So if he's not on your radar yet, go ahead and place him there, because he's going to have to take on a much larger role than he did last year, despite being a freshman who probably shouldn't have had to take on that big of a role in the first place. So I'm high on Nate Frazier, and I think by the end of the season, a lot of other people will be too. Still to come, we are going to do our 5 players that we want to hear good things about coming out of this weekend's scrimmage. We'll do our favorite memes, and then it's getting closer and closer, those playoff brackets, and I am ready to take whatever heat Connor throws at me. But first, we want to remind you that here on DawgNation at Large, we are so thankful to partner with Zagoria Law Firm, and what makes them so unique is that they are the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people bitten by dogs, as well as those who have been knocked down by dogs. They are the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, give them a call at 833-GA-DOG-BITE, that's DOGBITE, or visit ZagoriaLaw.com. And with that, we will move on to dog bites. First scrimmage this weekend, and it's a big deal. I think about something that Brandon Adams said, where you want to hear good news because no news technically means bad news. I think that applies to the first person, which I mean is the absolute obvious in Gunnar Stockton. You don't want it to be a Tennessee situation where they're having to blur out him throwing an interception, or, you know, a Nessmeyer or Lagway situation where it looks like it could be kind of injury related. So with Gunnar Stockton, that's the obvious one. You want to hear help, and you want to hear that he's made progress because he's the quarterback of this team, and it all starts with him.
Good news and good vibes for Gunnar coming out of this first scrimmage. He's going to be Georgia's starting quarterback this year, and we have heard and consistently seen great things from Gunnar in practice thus far this year. He's doing the things that they want to. I think the thing that I'm interested with the scrimmage, and we heard Mike Bobo touch on this a little bit yesterday, when you are someone like Gunnar who wants to extend plays, he wants to get everything he possibly can out of a play, you open yourself up to more hits. Now, you can't really train for that because of the way that Georgia does not contact quarterbacks in a scrimmage. But I'll be interested in seeing how does Gunnar sort of maybe rein that in a little bit and find the balance between extending plays with his legs, making plays out of the pocket, occasionally using his legs to pick up runs and first downs, while also not leaving open the possibility that you have a repeat of the Texas game where his helmet gets knocked off, and while he was very fortunate to be able to recover from that, You take enough of those hits, you're not always going to get back up. So how Gunnar does in that regard, I'm very interested coming out of this first scrimmage.
Also on the offensive side of the ball, and we touched on Noah Thomas last week, but with him being the tallest of the group, you want to hear good things coming out about him. I mean, I think you could honestly put the wide receiver room in this entire category just based upon how last year went, but he was one of the biggest players that Georgia brought in from the transfer portal, and you want to make sure that that talent isn't going to waste and that he's actually going to add value to the room. So you definitely want to hear something about Noah Thomas coming out of Saturday.
Yeah, to start fall camp, I don't know that there's been a player that has generated more consistent buzz than Noah Thomas, and you want to see him bring that and back that up at the scrimmage on Saturday there. So if he's able to go out and play well once again, I think that should only further excite what he can bring to this team. We heard Mike Bobo this week talk about Colby Young and what he brings to the table, and if Georgia's able to have both those guys after not really having a true physical outside wide receiver a season ago, we talked about making things easier for Gunnar Stockton. Having a Noah Thomas and having a Colby Young as reliable contributors, I think is going to make life much, much easier for the Georgia quarterback.
And I think that we can speak for our coworker here, Jeff Santel, that there's no person that wants to hear better things about Noah Thomas than Jeff, because he's put in all the stock. This one, I could guess you could say that this one's almost for the fans too, and that's Ellis Robinson. I feel like we haven't heard that much about him, and part of that I feel like is on purpose because everybody knows that Ellis is this fan favorite and he's got this really high expectation to live up to, but he's also playing behind some guys, so I feel like maybe Georgia has kind of kept his name quiet on purpose. But if he has a really good scrimmage, then the word is definitely going to get out, because the people that are going to be allowed at that scrimmage are the important ones, and they're going to want that information to get out. And just based on the fact that we haven't heard that much, I think it's important for all of DawgNation to hear some sort of update on the progress that Ellis has made.
Yeah, as we sit here today on August 7th, I don't anticipate Ellis Robinson to be Georgia's starting cornerback against Marshall. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to play. That doesn't mean that Georgia's not going to have a plan for him to make an impact on this team. But I think there's a gap right now between Daniel Harris and Ellis Robinson. And so Ellis, look, he might be Georgia's best pure cover corner out there, and I think they're going to find ways to get him out there in obvious passing situations. But if he's going to want to be an every down contributor like I think he knows he can be, he's got to become more physical. He's got to do a better job against the run. If he's able to do that, and I think this scrimmage is going to be a great test for him in that regard, that's how you start to see him get more time on the playing field. And while I'm actually going to even go hyper-specific here, I don't necessarily want to hear about Ellis Robinson having a pass breakup or Ellis Robinson coming down with an interception in coverage. I want to hear Ellis Robinson was doing a great job covering the flats, making things difficult, being a physical defender, because if he's doing that, that's how he gets on the field in a consistent role this fall, more so than just what he does defending passes when he's targeted.
So we're going to stick with the defensive side of the ball here. We're going to go to Quintavious Johnson, similar to like the Noah Thomas wide receiver situation. At this point, I feel like you just want to hear something positive about the edge and outside linebacker room in general. And having watched Quintavious Johnson in high school, you could tell that there was a lot of natural talent and potential, but he definitely needed a lot of polishing and then probably some time to just mature as a person and an athlete. And so within that room, I think a lot of people are expecting to hear stuff about Ella Madozie, but don't forget Quintavious Johnson when it comes to this practice. And I do feel good about the fact that we're going to walk away having heard something about him.
Yeah, Quintavious Johnson is slowly becoming one of the more interesting players on this Georgia defense. I think he benefited tremendously this spring by being out there when Gabe Harris could not. I think Georgia's going to move Gabe Harris around. He's going to play on the defensive line. He's going to play some outside linebacker. And right now, Quintavious Johnson is ahead of Ella Madozie in terms of being an every down outside linebacker. Madozie brings a lot from a pass rushing standpoint. But let's remember, he just got here, and there are going to be things in the run game that Madozie is just not yet quite comfortable doing. And so for Quintavious Johnson, if he's going to want to be a big contributor this year and more consistent contributor in his second year, he's got to have a really strong second scrimmage. And specifically at that outside linebacker position, I think he's the guy that if you're looking for positive words to come out about, it's going to be him, because I don't quite yet know if that's where Ella Madozie is in his development at Georgia.
So we'll wrap it up with Zion Branch. We've talked a lot about Zachariah, and I think there was a viral clip of Zachariah from practice the other day. But when it comes to Zion, when Georgia brought in those 3 transfers that could help in that safety room, at this point I think you want to hear about one of them in particular, just someone outside of KJ, Janelle, or Ja'Cory. But when we walk away from Saturday hearing stuff, I think the thing I want to hear about Zion is that they used him in multiple positions, because even though he is a little bit smaller, I think that gives him some versatility to be able to play safety or in that star position. So I want to hear that they use Zion Branch in multiple ways, because I think that's the difference between him and the other transfers that they brought in.
Yeah, it sounds like of the transfer defensive backs that they brought in, Zion Branch, Adrian Maddox, and Jaden Harris, sounds like Maddox and Branch are maybe the best position to contribute right away at Georgia. Maddox is going to be a one-and-done guy, whereas Branch has multiple years of eligibility remaining. And look, Ja'Cory Thomas is going to be starting week 1 opposite KJ Bolden, but by the time that Tennessee game rolls around, by the time Alabama comes to Athens at the end of September, I'll be very interested in seeing what kind of a role Branch has been able to carve out for himself. Got a chance to go through spring. Physically speaking, he stands out in that secondary with the size that he brings to that position. And so if he's able to get some of the mental things there, that gives Georgia another very, very good athlete in that back secondary to pair with KJ Bolden, who I think by the end of the season has a chance to be an All-American level safety.
So one really quick note before we move on. Yesterday was Coordinator Day, where all the Georgia coordinators came out to speak. You can find all of those videos on our DawgNation YouTube page, but I think the one that everybody was anticipating the most was the one from Mike Bobo. Connor and I did a full recap of that yesterday with some of the most important sound bites, so you can also find that on our DawgNation YouTube page. And while you're there, go ahead and subscribe to our channel and ring the bell. That way you get notifications anytime that DawgNation posts. So if you want to catch up on all the things that the coordinators said, then check out our DawgNation YouTube page. Okay, so let's go ahead and do Meme Machine.
Who's that going down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's the Meme Machine and Randy Black. It's the Meme Machine and Randy Black.
And we have Cody back.
Hello.
I feel like it's been a while since we've seen you.
We haven't all been together, in a very long time. I was doing some work for the AJC Super 11.
And what a perfect time for you to come back when we have such a big thing coming up later, and we might have to be separated by the end of it. So
Yeah, I need my referee outfit. That's what it sounds like.
So in terms of the memes this week, I feel like once college football season starts, that's when the memes kind of start to get better, just because you have more content. So now you're just kind of pulling at what you have. I'll kick us off this week. This came from Peter Burns on Twitter, and he said, "I still can't believe Indiana paid $500,000 to escape playing the football juggernaut that is Virginia, and it has all their records from the past few years: 5-7, 3-9, 3-7. We a couple weeks ago we made fun of Indiana a little bit, so I love tying this in. And oh my gosh, the fact that it's $500,000, like, I know that's not a lot to a big football program, but now I just think of it in terms of like that's $500,000 that's being wasted that schools are using to like pay recruits now. So I thought this hit on perfect what Connor and I were talking about a couple of weeks ago with everybody dogging on the SEC.
Yeah, I think that Kurt Cignetti, look, he talks a big game, but when you're ducking Virginia, who might be the worst team in the ACC, which is probably the worst Power 4 conference out there, you better go out there and win. Otherwise, you're going to open yourself up to a lot of criticism.
Yeah, they must think $500,000 is worth it, right? Like, that's the thought, is it's more costly to lose that game, which they think is a possibility, than it is to just pay the money, which is wild.
All right, Cody, what you got for us?
All right, mine is an audio clip this week.
I will tell you this, though. I didn't choose Georgia because I got recruited from Georgia. I didn't choose Georgia because I don't like wearing black socks.
Oh.
Yeah. And that may be crazy, but I hate wearing
No,
black
I think
because putting on black socks with black cleats is just so hideous.
it's slow.
It's so hideous to me.
It's slow.
Because when I put on white, I feel so fast
So
and so
fast.
smooth. Like, it's just someone.
So that's A.J. Brown, who's, of course, now in the NFL, played at Ole Miss, on Barstool Sports, saying the reason he didn't go to Georgia is because he didn't want to wear black socks, which is a very interesting take. He went on, the years he was at Ole Miss, what'd they go, 16-20 overall. Could have played for a national title in those years at Georgia. And obviously it's worked out for him in the NFL. But a very interesting reason not to come to Athens.
And the thing is, it's so specific and so stupid that I genuinely believe that it's true. Because, like, you can't just make that up, you know?
But as Cody has access to a number of reels and images that we have, you go through them, there are plenty of guys not wearing black socks at that point in time. And look, following A.J. Brown's recruitment, it was between Mississippi State and in Mississippi. That point in time, you can go look at who was running the Ole Miss program and see how he was getting recruits, including some from the University of Georgia. I don't know that the color of socks rather than the color of green played a bigger role in A.J. Brown ending up where he did.
Oh.
I will say, having gone around to visit all these recruits, the quirks, man. They all, everybody on the planet, right? But these guys, they're very particular, and they all have their different things that they like.
He must have never seen the Fab Five documentary and the importance of the Black Sox.
Yes, thanks, Michigan. All right, timeout again, and we will move on to Connor.
Yeah, so this is a basketball-related tweet, but I want to bring it into football. Imagine if NBA trades weren't announced and you didn't know who was on the team until they ran out of the tunnel the opening day, WWE Royal Rumble style. And then you see the obvious Nets fans there reacting, getting to see Kyrie and KD. Imagine if they did this with college football, not just from a transfer portal standpoint, like, oh my God, Georgia got Zachariah Branch and Noah Thomas this year. But imagine the recruiting stuff of like, oh wow, Georgia got Elijah Griffin, the number one defensive lineman in the country, and all that comes with that. Just imagine the excitement where game one, that's when fans find out who's going to be on their team this coming year. It would certainly make this game against Marshall a lot more interesting.
Georgia has the perfect tunnel for it, too.
Yes.
Right? Like, let the smoke keep going throughout the game. And, yeah, they've flipped the coin, and all of a sudden, first drive, and here you just see guys running out there as fast as they can.
All right. Is it time?
I think it's time.
I think it's time. I mean, how do we want to – I mean, this is our playoff predictions. I think we've been working on these all week. Last year, I think I won by like one, but I wouldn't have considered.
Neither of us won. Neither of us won. Last year. We had too many misses.
Okay, I think that I had more correct than Connor was what I was saying, but I mean, it
Neither
was
of us got
honestly
more than
pitiful.
50%.
Yeah, it was
Neither
pitiful.
got more than 50%.
And honestly, this year, I don't even know if it's going to be that much better, if we're being totally honest. Do you like want to go first, or do you want Cody to flip something?
I'm content to go first. I feel pretty good about what I'm going to have. You know, I got to a point where I started over analyzing what my playoff was going to look like. And then like most of these are going to be wrong anyway, come the end of the season. And so let's just go ahead and let it fly. I think one important thing with my playoff predictor this year is a difference from last year. You do not need to win your conference championship to be a top 4 seed. And so for one team in particular, for me, that opens the door for Notre Dame to get a top 4 seed. So my top 4, I'm doing this off the top of my head here as we get it pulled up. I have number 4, Notre Dame, number 3, Alabama, number 2, Penn State, and number 1, Clemson. I do have Clemson winning the ACC. I think they're going to lose to LSU week 1 and run the table from there. I have Alabama, a 10-2 SEC champion, as the number 3 seed. I have Penn State as the Big Ten champion. And then the 5 through 12 teams, I have Georgia at 5, losing the SEC championship game. That is consistent with our SEC championship predictions there. At number 6, I have Ohio State. Number 7, Texas. Number 8, Oregon. Number 9, I have Arizona State. They are the Big 12 champion. I think it's going to be a dart throw to who wins that league, but I really like Kenny Dillingham. I like that they bring back their starting quarterback and Sam Levitt. And so I think Arizona State is going to be the Big 10 or Big 12 representative, I think this is the year that the SEC gets 4 in, and I think the Big 10 only gets 3 in because my ACC dark horse this year is going to be the Louisville Cardinal as the number 11 seed. I like what they bring in. Jeff Brom's one of the best offensive coaches in the country. Miller Moss, a quarterback I liked a good bit at USC. They've got some real talent there. And then my G5, or I guess G6 now representative, give me the fighting early Kylers in Tulane. John Summerall, a really good head coach. I know Georgia fans might be a little bummed that their first home college football playoff game comes against Tulane. And that game against Notre Dame, where if it plays out the way that I have it projected, where Georgia loses the SEC championship game, Georgia will have played 2 more games against Notre Dame by when those 2 teams match up. And that's going to be a very interesting storyline. But I have Georgia getting the best of that in that year's game. I have Clemson beating Oregon in one of the college football playoff quarterfinals. Alabama, Ohio State is going to be a slobber knocker. I have Alabama winning that game. And a little bit of an upset, I have LSU beating Texas in the first round. I am not as high on Arch Manning as the rest of everyone else seems to be, but I have Penn State getting the best of LSU. I have Penn State and Georgia meeting each other in the college football national championship game. I believe that is a rematch of the 1983 national championship, which Penn State also won. And I am willing to admit, I think Georgia can win a national championship. I don't feel that they are going to do it this year. And so this is a little bit of a cowardice pick, but I have the Penn State Nittany Lions winning the national title this year. And a pick that will surely not come to fruition.
You know, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. A few thoughts before I get to mine. I actually like Tulane as the G6 because I can't remember if last year if they like were one game away from having a chance or they were one game away from basically taking somebody else out of the playoff. But I know that they did something important or had some sort of importance towards the end of the season. So I don't hate that pick. I'm glad that you took an ACC dark horse because I really thought you weren't going to, and I was really gonna have to like fight for mine. But the Penn State, like, really? Are you going to fall for that propaganda?
They've got a very easy schedule. They get Oregon at home. They have to go to Ohio State. I think they're going to split those games. They're going to go 11-1. I think they're going to win the Big Ten title this year. And I think they're going to find a way. I don't feel great about it, but I don't feel great about any team winning a national title this season.
But I think the thing that concerns me is like, I just can't, like with James Franklin, I'm just not certain that he can still win in those big moments. And maybe this is the year that he proves everyone wrong. And like, I think that every person out there who's making a bracket is probably going to have Penn State somewhere in it. But the fact that you have them winning it, I think that's like the one thing I really can't get behind. But you're also probably not going to be able to get behind my winner. So we might just have to agree to disagree. But the Penn State propaganda. Like, I just thought that you were a little bit smarter than that.
Look, they return a lot. I know wide receiver is obviously their biggest question, but you look at the recent national champions. Ohio State brought back a lot. Michigan brought back a lot. 21 Georgia team brought back a ton as well. And that's still a recipe for success, and I think Penn State follows that closest this year.
Okay, well, with further ado, I will quit arguing against yours and I will showcase mine. I'm going to kind of work backwards here. I know you work top to bottom. I'm going to go bottom to top. I've got my G6 team as UNLV, and it's not even really necessarily about Dan Mullen, but he's got a roster that's got some former blue chippers or signees from other power conferences. So if he can take some of that and turn it into, you know, some wins against, I guess, like Boise State's their biggest competition, but they were pretty close to being that group of 5 team last year. So I'm going to take them there. My ACC dark horse is Georgia Tech. And I know that you're probably going to have something to say about it, but I also don't know if you've looked at Georgia Tech's schedule. It is, even for like an ACC schedule, absolute cakewalk. I think they'll win that first game against Colorado. Syracuse will be a toss-up game, but that's at home, so I'm giving Georgia Tech the advantage here. They've got Clemson and Georgia, so I'm going ACC dark horse Georgia Tech with them ending the season as 10-2. And then for my number 10 team, I'm with you. I took Arizona State to be the conference champion out of the Big 12, but that's because we just really don't know that much about that conference. I gave them credibility for their quarterback coming back. I like their coach, but this is one that I think last year you took Kansas State and I took Utah. We weren't even close, so I'm just going to give them the benefit of the doubt. I've got Penn State at 9 because I have them losing to Oregon and Ohio, or I think it's losing one game in the regular season and then maybe losing the conference championship. But I can't trust James Franklin in big games. So I've still got them going into the playoff, but as a lower seed, they'll face Alabama because similar to you with my SEC teams that I had in here, I went based off of my ranking from the SEC Media Days poll, and I had Alabama finishing 4th, so I've got them there. And I had LSU finishing 3rd, so I've got them at 7. With Oregon, they actually have a pretty easy schedule this year. I feel like they could go cakewalk through the regular season, but I could see Oregon also losing a game to someone that they're not supposed to, and then potentially losing in that conference championship, because I believe it's Penn State plays Ohio State and Oregon again this year, right?
That is correct.
Okay.
I think the game to watch, Oregon goes on the road to Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Washington has the second longest home winning streak in the country behind only Georgia. That's a game that's very, very interesting to me for an Oregon team that is pretty young. A lot of talent, but a lot of questions as well.
Yeah, so that's kind of where my head was at, is that I'm just going to assume that Penn State's going to lose to both Ohio State and Oregon, and then with Oregon winning that game, I could see them having a slip-up game midseason just because they're some of the talent has left, and then that puts me at where we're at 5. I have Texas losing in the SEC championship, so I put them there. Then you've got my top 4, just like you. I went Notre Dame at 4 just because now the committee has the opportunity to give them a bye. I absolutely believe that they're going to. Clemson, the ACC champion, at 3. Georgia, the winner of the SEC championship, which I know doesn't guarantee you a bye. I've got them at 2. And then I've got Ohio State at 1 again, which I know is a little bit controversial because I do believe that they were my 1 seed last year. I think that Ohio State beats Texas week 1. Like you, I'm not super high on Arch Manning. That's going to be a long trip for them to go to Ohio State and have to play a noon game. And kind of with that too, like I know that there's this Ohio State, Michigan asterisk, but I think because Ohio State was so good last year going into that game, they just thought it was going to be an absolute breeze because they knew that they had all the talent and everyone was picking them to win. But I don't think that Ryan Day lets that get past him this year. So I know that Ohio State loses a lot of pieces, but I think that apart from that, they have a really easy schedule. They don't have to play Oregon this year. And then, of course, having them beat Penn State. So that's kind of how my seeding works. And then once we get past all these, I've got Texas over Notre Dame just based on talent specifically. Alabama, Ohio State could, be an absolute toss-up. That was the hardest game for me to pick by far. Got Oregon beating Georgia Tech, again, based off talent. LSU over ASU based off talent. And then, like, when you get to the Final Four, this is where I absolutely just had no idea what I was doing and going based off of just mostly seeding. LSU, Georgia, I really almost took LSU. But at the end of the day, like Brian Kelly is still looking for, a deep run, and I'm not going to fall for the Whit Weeks propaganda that with Garrett Nessmeyer coming back, they're going to win it all. Oregon over Clemson. Clemson plays a weak conference, so I'm going to give Oregon the benefit of the doubt there. Alabama, Ohio State, I have absolutely zero clue. But as you can see here, I'll stop rambling. I've got Ohio State and Georgia in the championship with Georgia winning it. And let me just say that I don't feel good about it at all. I honestly just picked Georgia because we are a Georgia-based show, and I didn't feel good about picking Ohio State because of the talent they had lost. Those Final Four games, I sat there and thought about that for 25 minutes, and I turned this in right at the last second because I couldn't pick. So I don't feel great about it. I feel good about my teams that I have and pretty much in the order that I have. But once you get to Final Four and championship, like I don't feel good about it at all, to be honest.
I would point out the only differences in our bracket in terms of the teams that we have in it, different ACC dark horse, different G5 team. We have the same SEC, Big 10, ACC, Big 12 teams.
Yeah, and you brought this up earlier, and I was going to mention it, like kind of reverse how it was last year where you had the 4 Big 10 teams and the 3 SEC teams. I kind of used that and flipped it just like you because there was such an outcry, and I do feel like there is more talent at the top when it comes to the SEC. Now, it could essentially be like last year where everyone in the SEC just tears each other apart and only hurts things in the long run, but part of me feels like the committee's not going to go that way this year, so I could see them reversing those numbers, but pretty much still having the same when it came to everything else.
Who's your first team out?
Probably an SEC team. Again, if we're going based off preseason, or no, maybe a Big 10. Either let's go Texas A&M or who else would it be from the Big 10? I don't think it'd be an ACC team. Maybe somebody like Miami. I don't know. I didn't think past that far because it took me long enough to get to those points.
Mm-hmm. Give me Indiana.
Really?
I feel gross saying it. Coach Spaghetti's a good coach, but their schedule again sets up not quite as favorably as it did a season ago, mind you. But like they're going to be in contention once again. I like their quarterback Francisco Mendoza. They're a team that I think is going to be in the playoff picture, and I think it'll be a 4th Big 10 team that is left outside this year.
What do you think about my ACC dark horse?
Do you have them beating Georgia?
No, but I think that they can go 10-2.
I don't see a path for them getting in. Look, Haynes King is a very talented quarterback. When he is on, he is great. He didn't even make it healthy through last season. And so there's, I think, a bit of a gap between where Georgia Tech can be based on their highs. but also the fact that they still, I believe, went 8-5 last season and lost to some teams where, well, yes, you look great against Georgia. You beat Miami. You still got to go out there and prove it, in my opinion.
But it's just looking at even the strength of the ACC schedule, because clearly when we saw last year's strength of schedule really didn't have anything to do with it. I think that they beat Colorado week 1, then it's Gardner-Webb, Temple, Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Duke, NC State, Boston College, Pitt, all teams that are on the bottom of the ACC. So you're right. I am looking at the ceiling of what Georgia Tech could do, and they were somewhere in the middle of the pack. I even looked at UNC and Louisville just like you, but just looking at their schedule and even knowing with Haynes King and the injury, like Aaron Philo still played a lot last year, so they do have some sort of backup option, which is probably more than the rest of the teams in the ACC. But I also really like that neither you or I had Miami winning.
Conspiracy theory. Kaylee picked Georgia to win it all so that people would overlook her having Georgia Tech get into the college football playoff. That's exactly what she did. You know, they're going to go, oh yeah, Kaylee picked Georgia. She's one of us. She also had clean old-fashioned hate the loser of that game, Georgia Tech, getting into the college football playoff this year. Can't quite pull that one past me.
You know, and I understand. I could see why you would make sense of that. But when it came to our ACC dark horse, if I get nothing right about this bracket this year, but I get my ACC dark horse right, like I will accept that as a personal victory. And so I really looked into the ACC teams this year because, I mean, last year it probably couldn't have been any worse than it was. So I was like, if I'm going to get one thing on this bracket right, let it be my dark horse. Okay, and with that, I think that we should probably go ahead and wrap up. And when we do accountability check at the end of the season,
it's going to be tough.
It's going to be hard. I'm not ready for it. So any final thoughts from today?
No, I'm excited for the college football season. We're 1 week closer. I believe we have 2 more Thursdays until college football is back. And so I'm just counting the days down until we get there.
Which week 1 game are you most excited about?
Texas, Ohio State. That's a game that could be it's the first game on that Saturday, that first full college football Saturday of the season. Could also be the last game of the season as well.
I could see that too. All right, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up today's show. Thank you for joining us here on DawgNation at Large, and we'll see you right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock.